Welcome to our final session of the day. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation about artificial intelligence. It's a game changer, but are you AI ready? Because this isn't really a technology conversation, and I'll allow our speakers to explain what that means. So I'm going to invite Youssef and Rob up to the stage now to tell us about how we can think about this question of, are we AI ready? Welcome.
Thank you, David. Thank you, everybody. I'm Youssef Hashimi from IBM, and
Rob Palacios, Texas Capital Bank.
So thank you for joining us here today. We're here to have a conversation, as I said to David, kind of the anti-technology discussion. What Rob and I are going to talk about is some of the organizational dimensions of actually driving value in your organization with AI and what it takes to be AI ready and really, reap the benefits of building solutions as opposed to just buying components of AI technology. And so we are going to use the Slido app to take a couple of questions at the end. So please use the app to log your questions, and hopefully we'll have some time to take them. So Rob, thank you for joining me here today. So
pleasure.
Tell me a little bit about Texas Capital Bank and TCB Labs in particular, which is the organization that you run.
Sure. So start with Texas Capital Bank. We're I consider still a little bit of a startup bank, only about 20 years old, headquartered in Dallas, Texas, and have a presence in all the major markets there. From the beginning, the way the bank was formed was because there was a gap in service to the middle market clients in those areas. So, Texas has gone through lots of different ups and downs, the savings and loan crisis and energy crisis and so on. So the founders found that there was an opportunity to serve businesses in those markets. And so when we formed the bank, it was very commercial-focused business organization. We do serve some consumers, but we don't have brick and mortar. I went there I joined the bank in 2004 after spending time with the National Security Agency, different consultant organizations. So definitely not the banking prototype. When I got there, we're about $2.3 billion in assets, had about 10 branches, I believe. Now we're about almost $30 billion in assets and have 11 branches. So we've stayed true to the brick and mortar is not our model. What that creates, though, is a lot of pressure on how we serve our clients. Because we don't have branches on every corner, we have to use technology to enable banking to happen through the normal course of business. So that's what a lot of my focus has been there for the past now 14 years is how do we bring technology to bear so that lack of brick and mortar doesn't create a competitive disadvantage for us. So when we formed TCB Labs, really about a year ago now or so formally, it was now looking at what are the emerging technologies we can use to come and solve some of the business problems we have. So our focus is around cognitive RPA, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, fintech partnerships, and emerging technology. So, the relationship that we built has really focused in on that AI and cognitive component.
When you started thinking about embarking on your AI journey, what were some of the challenges that you foresaw? Was it technology? Was it skills? Was it organization structure, or all of the above?
Sure. I mean, and as you teed it up in the intro, I'm a technologist by education and I have a lot of experience in technology, but it's not a technology issue. The real challenges that I think many organizations face, and ours is no different, is that there was this cultural change that had to happen because we're so dependent on that relationship model and we depend on very senior people to manage that relationship. Part of what we have to do as we deploy cognitive solutions is make sure that we are able to create trust with our employees or with our stakeholders so that they don't see us approach this from a technology perspective. They see how can we leverage technology to help you do what you do better. And that's a tough goal because we're dealing with things that can damage franchise value. Legitimately, we could damage the value that the organization has built over time. So we have to build trust to say what we're doing is going to enhance the value and assist the humans in doing their work better. So that was a big challenge, the culture component. No surprise, like many other organizations, data is always a challenge as well. How do you get the right data dependably in a way where you can actually do something with it with machine learning algorithms or cognitive?
And so even though you call your organization TCB Labs, tell me about the role that business value plays and how you guys operate.
Sure. So before we actually launched the TCB Labs moniker, my team and I researched, probably for 18 months, different innovation labs. And we found really great labs that focused on technology for technology's sake and kind of out there, all the way down to the spectrum where we found innovation groups that were really executing, not really innovating. And all those have a place in an organization. But for us, we said we need to be founded in business solutions. We need to be founded in our business strategy. So when we look at opportunities to employ cognitive, we also manage the bank's 5-year roadmap. We look at that roadmap and say, where does cognitive play a role in solving some of the things that we want to accomplish as an organization? And I think by doing that, it gets back to the cultural aspect. We have this very sound, fiduciary responsibility to what we're doing in the organization. When we ask for investment in the labs, we always tie it back to here's the benefit we can gain over time. So by basing it on a business solution value, it allows us to get a little more leeway in the things we take on.
So I know you're kind of a smaller bank, so organizationally, do you think that smaller size helps with respect in terms of driving business value, or do you think that large organizations can also employ kind of a similar model to what you...
Yeah, I think the size of the organization is kind of a double-edged sword. There's a lot of positives around the cultural change because I've been there now 14 years. I know a lot of the folks in the bank, and although we've grown larger, I'm able to still pick up the phone and call someone and say, look, I want you to participate in this. Would you be a stakeholder with me? On the flip side, though, it creates a very, we have to be very precise on what we fund and what we invest in. Because we're a small organization, we have to pick our shots and have a high percentage of success with those because we don't have a huge R&D budget like a much larger organization would have. So, there's good and bad to that. I think the situation around the cultural piece helps us because there's still that, we're in this together and we're trying to accomplish the same goals and drive value for the organization.
Okay. So when you were looking into selecting a partner to help you with your cognitive AI journey, what factored into your decision making?
Sure. So there were a couple different things, just like you would I work with a lot of Fintechs and startups, just like they look at how can I get to market fastest? That was a big consideration for us. So we looked at 3 different models. The first being, let's go hire TCB Labs staff. Let's go find 20 people that included data scientists, design thinkers, technologists, change management folks, and let's build that model out that way. We start decomposing that. That's a really tough thing to do, is to go find the right people, have them come in at the right time, and be able to start actually driving value. We also looked at some other consulting partners and said, can we cobble together a lab based on picking and choosing from different folks and other consulting organizations? And then, we started talking to IBM back, it was several years ago, a couple years ago now, and got introduced to the IBM Garage concept, which was basically a one-stop shop. Kind of IBM would bring together all the different resources necessary to start up an innovation organization, and you do it on a subscription basis. So we were a little skeptical at first, to say the least. I remember meeting here, I think last year with another client of the Garage, and he was like, that skepticism is well founded. You should be skeptical, but when we engaged with the Garage concept, we were very pleased. We were able to get going day one and start doing innovation versus having to spend time hiring.
And how do you kind of view the role of, since you're focused on business value, of kind of design thinking and that type of thing within, and agile? Yeah. So is that like a critical part of your strategy as well?
Absolutely. I think design thinking and the methodology around design thinking, although it's not new, it's sometimes difficult to execute. And what we found is that by executing in a way, whether we're doing workshops, design thinking, or other kinds of sessions there, by including our stakeholders, and we had a workshop with our executives and really introduced them to innovation and allowed them to tell us what they felt the business problems were in the organization, and then began to prioritize how we began to solve those. That design thinking strategy really helped us with the cultural aspect to say, we're not just building technology and hoping that we'll solve a problem. We're looking at the problems first and then looking, can we apply technology to it? So,
And has that helped with you kind of looping it back to the change management? Has that helped with the change management?
Absolutely, man. And what we do is, so we had this workshop. We had about 105 different ideas and consolidated down to the top 7 or so that we wanted to move into the innovation chain. And what that allows us to do is anytime someone says, well, what about this or what about that, we can still include it, but we always bring up, here are the votes from the workshop that the executives decided on, and we can change that, but you're part of this journey with us. We're not out on our own trying to figure everything out. We're including you and you're taking your input as our guiding principle.
And so you talked about, kind of the need to have a high hit rate, right? Because of the small size. But do you think that because in the garage, there's kind of a fail fast kind of model. Do you think that the garage concept incubates you from some of the, potential failures that you're bound to run into on AI projects?
Sure. I mean, and we've already, in this session of garage, over the past 12 months, we've had a couple of proof of concepts that we've taken to a certain point and then said, it's not time yet. We don't either have the sponsorship or the change in the organization is going to be too high to do that. So we shelve that very quickly. And whether we want to call that a failure or just push it off and shelve it, it allows us to move very quickly and say, let's not focus more resources on something that we think has a lower probability of success. Let's focus on those that are gaining momentum and seem to have a higher probability.
And the success is not just a function of the technology, it's the actual adoption.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's critical for us is adoption is king, right? I mean, I'd rather have a little less ambitious of a cognitive platform that we're rolling out that has higher adoption than something that is very ambitious but no one wants to use, no one can use. So it's striking that balance on how do you get some of that capability rolled out, get comfort in the organization before you start, continue to iterate through and creating much more complex systems.
So how are things going?
Pretty well. So we're through our first, what we call our initial set of POCs. They're now moving into a pilot phase. Again, the key points there are we're engaging with our stakeholders, and what we try to do is say, like one of them is going to be on the sales side, so prospecting and so on. So rather than us trying to roll this out ourselves, independently, we're engaging with our strategic sales group and saying, let's help you roll out your processes that you're trying to roll out by using this capability to increase the quality of the types of prospects we get and so on. So by doing that, now you're just getting more people in the boat that have objectives that line up what we're trying to do, and it allows for that to coalesce and get that culture to begin to change that way.
And do you, kind of with your experience now, so you and I have been on this journey for about a year together, right? Do you really believe that AI is going to help transform your business long term?
Absolutely. And the audience members probably have similar experiences. You probably used AI somewhere else. And for me, my first AI was with National Security Agency. And I saw what we could do there for a much higher price and having to build a lot more custom. But I saw the impact that artificial intelligence and neural networks and some of the precursors to machine learning algorithms could do in a very complex environment. I think now with the ability to have a much lower cost of ownership, with more data available, GPUs, the computing architecture that's available, now organizations like us and broader organizations can take advantage of the same techniques at a much smaller price point. And that's, I think, what's key is more data, lower costs to begin the process, and an ability to quickly iterate through in an agile way. I think those are keys that will change the organization.
Okay. So now I'd like to start taking some questions from the audience. And I think we have plenty of time to do that. So the top question here from Slido, if we can bring that up. Great. Good. So how do you avoid TCB Labs becoming just another quote-unquote innovation theater?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's something that keeps me up at night all the time, right? Because, if you can't deliver value, then, right, you're not valuable. So, we try to continuously reinforce why we're doing what we're doing and the impact that has the organization. So back to tying it to the bank's 5-year strategic roadmap, tying it to the way we make money. Ultimately, it's got to be by doing things that are innovative, it's got to allow us to make more money or have a much lower cost to operate. So if we can't explain those two things in a coherent way, then frankly, I'm not that interested in being involved in innovation for innovation's sake. I want to actually change the organization and drive more value.
And that's actually one of the things I think we talked about when we were talking about the IBM Garage. For us at IBM, when we say garage, it's actually, it's kind of a mindset that we're trying to incubate things that are actually going to go into production and be used.
That's right.
Now, we do have a concept of failing fast, right? With, because there's the POC phase before you get into pilots. But kind of the ultimate objective is to actually drive things into usage.
That's right. And I think, as you look at those labs, I don't know what I've read a statistic somewhere that the average tenure for someone running an innovation lab is like 2.5 years. I think a lot of that has to do with if you don't drive business value and don't show at least incremental lift on the organization's operations, then it's just really easy to say, well, let's just not fund the innovation lab going forward. So those are things we really focus on, is how do you continue to drive that? And it's really tough, because you look at how do you create ROI out of something that's a concept, right? It's hard to do that, but you got to create the legs along the way to say, here's what we're going to try to solve and the scope we're looking at. But without that, it's hard to keep getting funding, keep getting sponsorship.
So one of the questions, it's not here on my app, but it popped up here before, so I'm going to go to that one, was, because I think it's pertinent, is how do you measure the success of these projects?
Sure. So we use some, not that, pretty standard types of approaches. When you're first looking at the portfolio of innovation, some of that is the breadth of that portfolio. So how many ideas, concepts you have in place, how many are moving to the POCs, how many of those are moving further in. So because when you're first innovating, that's really all you have to measure. You can create some level of ROI on a concept, but there's not enough meat there to really drive that home. But along the way, at some point you have to say, if we're going to go to operationalize this POC, here's the return. So there we get much more of a formal business case. We have a concept internally where our executives sit on, and I sit on with them, is when ideas come to the table, we look at them kind of like an investor pitch and have the ROI, the investment required positioned, and then say, here's what we need from the bank as the investor. Are we willing to fund this initiative to move forward? So that's a big part of creating those metrics around that.
So I'm going to go to this question here. Kind of blend a couple of questions together. What is your flagship AI? It says product, but I think in your case, it's not really product, it's more of a project, right? And how is it going to provide value to your bank?
Sure.
And maybe talk about, the one pilot that we're talking about actually driving into production now.
Yeah, so the first thing we started on in Garage, and this pilot we're talking about, is one of our business problems is finding business customers that fit to the services and products that the bank can provide. So that's kind of a hard problem, especially with a relationship bank like us, where unless you start meeting people and start talking to them about what they need, then it's hard to assess, is that the right client to go after? Because we're not all things to all people, and many potential clients we look at, we say, sorry, we can't serve you in the way that's going to make us feel like we're adding a lot of value to your organization. So what we did is say, let's look at external data, let's look at our internal data performance, let's look at other kinds of client-based information that allows us to better source those clients. So that's the concept that we're beginning to roll out in the pilot, that allows us and our relationship managers to better identify and rank, hey, these clients, these prospects look like they match the kind of clients that we serve really well and that we can add value to and help. Let's focus on these first versus shotgunning across just whoever you come across. And the lift behind that is significant. There's a huge amount of time, as many of you guys know in this audience, spent on just trying to find the right next client, to figure out what the right next product is, to figure out how we better serve that client. So by using machine learning techniques and cognitive, it allows the RMs to be better armed to have that next level discussion, to understand what are the things that particular kind of client is probably most interested in.
And where do you see, so that's kind of in the relationship management space. What are some of the areas you see that we've already kind of laid out in our original design thinking, but are coming next? What other areas?
Yeah, so there's a lot also around the tying the strategic financial organization to the front line as well. So think about what are the kinds of areas we want to go into. Those of you that are with financial institutions or banks understand, there's a lot of concepts around concentration risk, how many dollars of capital you can have allocated to a particular class of loans and others. So allowing us to model that and including economic factors that'll help us understand what happens in the next downturn. I mean, we're having to face some of this already through stress test type of activities, but leveraging those modeling efforts to say what industries, what type of clients are the ones we want to go after, and we can serve the best if there's an economic downturn coming down the pike. So it's really moving further into the finance organization to help them, provide them kind of a way to help guide the organization, provide feedback.
So I'm going to go with this question next. Do you think that expectations of people using AI is higher than its actual performance?
Yeah, I think, and as everyone kind of the audience here knows, there's been so much, in trade articles and lots of marketing. IBM does a great job marketing Watson, and it's all its great capabilities. So I have to sometimes fight internally a little bit, say it's not going to cure cancer for us. So there is this expectation misalignment where some people are just really fired up about, AI and more, as you would call, more the general intelligence. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Again, I'm a technology geek, but I'm more interested in applied artificial intelligence or applied cognitive. And a lot of what we do is just going in and saying, this is going to help provide us a lift, but it's not going to, be the end all to everything. There isn't a silver bullet we're trying to gain to. So a lot of it is, I'm not suggesting we talk down expectations, but just try to align them with really what we're doing and say, this is the problem we're trying to solve, and this can help do that, but it's not going to be the end all.
And so, I know we're asking you, but just my kind of philosophy on that as I interact with a lot of clients is to not focus on the AI, to focus on the change in user experience that you're trying to affect.
Yep.
And AI is only going to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. It's only going to contribute to that. There might have to be some design thinking that's involved. There might have to be some, data work that has to happen, or, so it's not just about the AI. And so if you don't make it about the AI, that'll kind of lower the expectations of the AI.
And it's hard work too. I mean, we have a group of managing directors that most of our frontline reports to, and the discussions we have with them are, we can build these great cognitive systems, but unless we adopt and enforce the process to use them, they're just pieces of technology. So, to your point, it's how do you adopt and how do you roll this out in a way that we get the business value? That's what a lot of our focus is on.
So you and I have talked about this, it kind of goes back to our conversation a little bit earlier about small bank, big bank. Do you advise one center of AI within the organization or several areas should develop small AI COEs within the organization?
Yeah, I think some of that has to do with the culture of the organization. Some organizations, by their nature, are fragmented out, and perhaps there's an ability to get value from having separate innovation groups throughout the organization. I personally feel like by having one at least, driver of innovation, I'm talking innovation from a execution, not a thinking. Everyone's got to think about innovation. It allows you to focus better. Right? It allows you to dedicate the resources that are necessary to drive innovation in a more consistent way and look across all the portfolio in one place. Our intent over time, though, is to push innovation further out into the lines of business and have innovation managers or coordinators that are the tentacles out into the organization that are on the ground and can bring back more of that real-time feedback. We've thrown around the concept of call them TCP Labs fellows, or just different things that allows them to be out there helping us understand where the real business problems are.
I like this one. Some say ROI equals restraint on innovation. Yeah. Do you agree?
I think there is some level of, there is a cap on how much you can innovate without producing value. Right? And again, I love technology. I'm technology by background, but the realities of business are you have to deliver value. So there is some truth to that, to say funding is not unlimited. You have to be able to return something back to those that are funding your innovation. And sometimes that comes across as I've got to stop the innovation and move into rollout, even though there's more you can do. So there is some truth to that, but I think it also helps create a healthy innovation approach because you're forced to think about business value and return.
Okay. So this kind of maybe is a repeat of one of the prior questions, but I think a lot of people they say AI is kind of a generic concept. Can you explain what business problem you addressed and how exactly you did that? And if you want, I can help answer that too.
Yeah, so, and that's really one part of the challenge, right, is AI as a concept and a superset of capabilities, right, decomposing that into, we're talking deep learning with neural networks, or we're talking further down machine learning and algorithms around that. So we try to say, we're not going to build general intelligence. We're going to build some very specific solutions of problems we have, and focus on, to date, we focus on machine learning algorithms with employing some of the tool sets like Watson to do some things as well. What that's allowed us to do is, we talked about the solution around finding the best next potential client, the best next product to offer. Those are the things we're focused on. We think these techniques really help us do that and allow us to show value more quickly than we would otherwise.
Yeah, and actually when we finished the design thinking session and the one thing that popped up to the top around relationship management, we as a group didn't just say, oh, it's AI that's going to solve this problem, right? It was more than that, right? So we then sat down, and yes, there are machine learning algorithms. There's a little bit of Watson. It's kind of a little bit of Watson, a little bit of open source. Yep. But there's a lot of data that we had to go pull together in order to pull off what we were doing, because we were kind of looking at economic conditions out in the marketplace in your specific local geographies, because you do serve specific local geographies. Yep. So you needed to have that data about those local geographies in order to really allow the algorithms to really, bring the best leads kind of up to the top.
Sure.
So we just have about 3 minutes left. And so I wanted to maybe give you an opportunity to share any parting words of wisdom for other banks and what they need to do to drive value from their investments in AI.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the key thing, we'll just reiterate again, is the cultural change. I remember dealing with an analyst when I was at a different place that had been an expert in their particular focus area for like 20, 30 years. And I was a young kid coming out of college, and I remember I was building my first neural network and applying an AI solution to help him do his job better. And the visceral reaction he gave me on what's this young kid coming in here trying to devalue what I've built, to spend 20 years creating value in. It was the solution was right. The approach was horrible. And it really, something that stuck with me is, how do you approach humans with a technology solution that may diminish some of what they do, but how do you present them with the value it creates for them to do other things that are higher order thinking? And that cultural change and that overall change management, I think is critical. I think I've seen so many times where we try to roll technology out in general as an industry, but we don't consider the human psychological impact. That's fraught with peril. It's hard to do that without having the human stakeholders on board and having them feel like you're giving them a tool versus trying to diminish their value.
Yeah, and at IBM we talk about AI being augmented intelligence, and we were talking about this the other day. It's about amplifying human cognition. So in automation, you may eliminate tasks for human beings, but in the world of AI and cognitive, you're actually trying to help the human beings be better at what they do.
That's right.
And if you can kind of go into it and let them know that you're really here to help them, and kind of color the conversation that way up front, and you're trying to make money with it too.
That's right. Yeah.
Then I think that's going to really drive up an organization's success at achieving value from their investments in AI.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.